Hey everybody, I was kinda hoping this article was not going to blow up this much. By now most of you have probably already seen it covered, but I'm gonna throw my own 2 cents in my own way because I already had this script mostly complete before getting sick. I'm still recovering by the way, so once again, sorry about the tone. This article was a hilarious read from start to finish. A beautiful glazing of Dragon Age Veilguard, the biggest disappointment of the year because while there have been far worse games out this year, including the biggest failure in the history of gaming, Concord of course, a $400 million disaster, Veilguard is still the one that stands out the most to me. Because unlike Concord and unlike the game Sweet Baby Inc. sent straight into the grave, unlike the weird dystopian lab experiment that was Dustborn, unlike the unsurprising mediocrity of Ubisoft's releases, I actually had a glimmer of hope and passion for Veilguard, and I think that was also reflected in the gaming community as a whole. It was a game that was supposed to symbolize whether or not BioWare was truly, gone as a studio after what happened with Anthem and Andromeda, or if they were back. Sadly, as we got closer to launch, that hope started to die because of all that we saw coming, right? So for example, the drama with the top surgery scars, which concerned me not because they included them, but because they lied, saying that they did it for the sake of inclusion, while in reality taking away so many other basic options, such as more feminine proportions and more uniquely masculine options, making it then not about inclusion at all, but about exclusion. And beyond that, there was also that one writer, Patrick Weeks, who, while replying to some questions online, confirmed publicly that the game would not have blood magic because they didn't want to add complications to the writing of their story and to the characterization of their characters. To many people, this was just a meaningless thing, like who cares, are you really going to cry about blood magic? But to me, it was a big red flag. It was an admittance that this game's story, characters and world building were going to be minimized or infantilized because the writers were either too lazy or too stupid to write any complex or nuanced material. And then when the game came out, that's exactly what happened. And then the cherry on the cake was ex-BioWare developer David Gator plus a few current BioWare developers, Patrick Weeks included, blasting their own fanbase because they thought that the game was looking like crap. And of course the developer diary of the director, Corinne Bush, whatever the being filled with identity politics nonsense in the Dragon Age section did not help either. These were all warning signs to what would end up in a game that was an absolute disaster of a Dragon Age game and a very disappointing mediocre action-adventure game on its own. It's barely even an RPG, your dialogues are all the same, you don't specialize in anything, you have very few instances to take advantage of a specific class or faction trait that actually leads to an interesting conversation or a different kind of outcome, your decisions along the way don't matter either. The only thing that matters towards the endings is game completion, the lore is broken, the characters are unrecognizable, and even your playable character, Rook, is the same as anyone else's Rook. There are no different paths to take, no different alliances to make, no nothing, so you don't even have replay value. So you can imagine my surprise at seeing an article glazing the director as the ruler of RPGs and the conqueror of haters. Beyond that though, what you cannot imagine is my surprise at Corinne even going for this. I mean, game journalism has decayed into such a shameful state that it's basically nothing but a joke at this point. But this article is horrendous, even by game journalist standards. And if you've been paying attention to my channel, you would know that the standard for games journalism is down in the mud. Even by those standards, this article caught me off guard. You'd think that if you were Corinne Bush or any other BioWare insider, you just want to shut up for a few months, let people forget how bad this game is, let Avowed and Assassin's Creed Shadows come out, and then after that, come back with like an update, like I don't know, New Game Plus or something, and a big legion of desperate game journalists glazing the game and begging people to give it another try, instead of doing one of the most embarrassing interviews I've ever seen with yet another journalist notorious for being an unhinged lunatic, praising someone who has done nothing with the undeserved opportunity that they were handed on a silver platter. But hey, I guess our girl Corinne just couldn't keep it in her pants, so let's have a read and call out the batches of copium, shall we? So this first part actually has nothing. I have no idea why they would open up an article just randomly talking about Super Smash Bros. And which Dragon Age character would fit into it. They shift to how important Varric is as a character to the franchise, which is ironic given how they completely shat on him in Veilguard. Varric has been something of a poster dwarf for the franchise. He is also a perfect representation of Dragon Age at large, an emotionally complex character. That holistic sense of character is a big part of what made Dragon Age so successful and lasting. Yeah, lasting. at least until now. What they did to Varric is a shame. Throughout the game I was already complaining about how sidelined both him and Solus are, and by the end they just do away with both of them as they did with the rest of the pre-established lore and history, essentially rebooting the entire series to do with as they please, which is funny because of how the article opens up, with this sort of homage to Dragon Age as a franchise, through Varric as a sort of representative symbol of it, two things that they utterly destroyed with the way that they handled the story in Veilguard. Additionally, it's also funny because it implies that they actually had hopes that this game was going to be good and successful enough for them to continue its story, and with those two things put together, alongside with the premise of a Super Smash Bros. Ever including Dragon Age, the funniest thing is that if there was ever a chance in hell for that to happen, it would have been before Corinne Busch and the rest of the team in charge of Veilguard completely destroyed it. Now at most the only thing that you're going to be included in is Angry Joe's list of games of 2024. They also try to associate Baldur's Gate 3 with Veilguard. It's yet another thing that makes this entire article so bizarre. If I was a director of Veilguard, the last thing I would want mentioned when talking about my mediocre game would be the mention of the RPG that everyone wanted my game to be, but that I and my team were just way too talentless, passionless, and incompetent to make happen. Again, the title of the article is Corinne Busch, Ruler of RPGs, and they got Baldur's Gate 3 standing in the same article like this massive contrasting figure to Veilguard, a game that doesn't even qualify as an RPG, easily the worst in the series, and honestly, the only reason why it's not the worst of its release year is because 2024 was a show. Then we have this, I don't even know what the fuck this is meant to be. It's not lost on me, and it's not lost on the team, how important these games are in people's lives. Coming into this game, that's a tremendous feeling of accountability and of needing to be true and authentic to what these games mean to people. When it comes to authenticity in games, plenty of directors and developers talk the talk, but Busch is the rare game maker who delivers. From her time with The Sims to Dragon Age, Busch has always brought a deep sense of humanity to the game, putting characters first and never shying away from nuance or complexity in identity, relationships, and existential crisis. It's what makes Busch a leader in the industry, and why BioWare tried so hard to carry on the Dragon Age series' legacy with Veilguard. But Busch hasn't finished yet. She's come a long way in the industry and has wisdom to impart, and more projects to come. Did I pass through a membrane into some kind of alternate reality or something? This is written as if Busch has been in charge of the Dragon Age franchise for years. The glazing is so embarrassing on this little chapter of this guy's little fanfiction. Let's be real here for a second. Corinne Busch was a nobody cranking out Sims games and more DLC packages than you can count for the corporate machine that is EA Games. She didn't even work at BioWare. From this point, she was thrown onto the role of directing the long-awaited sequel to Dragon Age Inquisition, and the only other event in between these two things was a sex transition and a new set of pronouns. Corinne hasn't delivered shit outside of a couple of Sims games and around 87 DLC packets. With Veilguard, Corinne delivered nothing but a disappointing flop. She tore down the Dragon Age brand and ruined the long-awaited sequel that the fans were actually excited for because of the Solus plotline being one of the most compelling things to come out of Dragon Age Inquisition. The fundamental failure of Veilguard, both in its storytelling and world-building as well as in its gameplay and game design aspects, show that Busch actually has very little to impart. Busch's place in the industry shouldn't be ahead of anything in the AAA market. At most, it would be ahead of a small niche game that appeals to the so-called modern audience. I could see Busch somewhat succeeding in making small dating simulator type of games with maybe a little pointless side storyline and a lot of cringy, annoying, quirky characters that simply do not belong in Dragon Age or Mass Effect or any other AAA production for that matter that needs to take itself more seriously and competently. But that's it. That is it. You cannot expect this kind of content and this kind of mentality anywhere else. Not even in AA games. If you go into AA games, the budget's still going to be way too fucking high for this kind of content. You're talking about a minute minority appeal. You're talking about like appealing to people who don't give a about story, don't give a about characters, don't give a about anything. They only care about seeing themselves represented in the dog shit that they're playing. This nonsensical article tries so hard to rewrite history, posing as if Corinne has been some kind of leader or influential developer in the industry, like this line here. It's what makes Busch a leader in the industry. A leader of what exactly? She hasn't led anything. She led one project and the project went off a But anyway, like many developers, Busch got her start from humble beginnings, working on a series that's a far cry from a fantasy epic, Tiger Woods' PGA Tour. I swear, man, you can't make this shit up. I couldn't have written a better joke even if I tried to. This is gold. But alright. I'll be fair, obviously loads of great developers once started from humble beginnings. It's just like most other things in life for the majority of people. We start from the bottom and then we keep climbing that ladder. However, unlike the majority of people who eventually climb so high that they have articles written about them and their humble beginnings, Corinne hasn't really achieved shit. And I know how much of an asshole that makes me sound like when I say it, but honestly, I just don't care that much when I really think about it, because at the end of the day, if you take for example the approach of don't do unto others what you would not like to have done unto you, I can confidently say that I would never accept some random journalist to come and make a fake-ass disingenuous article glazing my ass cheeks as if I earned something or was someone of importance when I had just seen my game flop embarrassingly. So yeah, you pretty much open yourself up to scrutiny when you accept to do something like this and you haven't earned it. And the rest of this page is just a bunch of yapping about nothing. Next up. Those specific RPGs have a lot to say about identity and personality. No, they don't. And that's a topic that Busch has constantly wanted to explore in her work. Yeah, I can tell. It turned out wonderfully for Veilguard, didn't it?
So, I'm non-binary.
Holy Jesus.
Well, Tosh is pounding that snake's nose. She's still holding the ruby in her other hand. Maker's panties. I was so proud.
Oh,
Ah, shit. They're still holding it. Sorry.
Free mode.
What are you doing? Pulling a barb. Oh, okay.
a barb.
Tradition in the Lords of Fortune from one of our old members, Barb. Good guy, but like most of us, his plans went sideways a lot. Bad blood among your crew's not good for morale, but there's not always time for big, drawn-out apologies. So, when one of us screws up and we know we've screwed up, we do a quick 10 to put it right. Pulling a barb.
Before leading the charge on Veilguard, Busch honed their skills working on an even bigger mega-hit franchise, The Sims. Working at Maxis and on a game like The Sims is an incredibly fortunate environment for a designer to really hone their craft. They're deeply complex games. You're really exploring underlying systems that drive character behaviors, skill progression, game economies, all allowing for emergent gameplay. Yeah, it's too bad that Veilguard ended up with no deep complex underlying systems of its own. Too bad the whole thing is just an on-rails experience with no complexity anywhere. Am I right, guys? Morality, karma system? Nope. Affinity system with companions? Nope. Affinity system with factions that goes beyond the fucking items that they let you buy from that one merchant? Nope. Affinity system with individual NPCs? Nope. Ability to disagree, argue, and maybe even kick out members of your crew? Nope. Deep RPG Nope. Deep combat system with intricate mechanics that require paying attention to a goddamn thing rather than just smashing the attack button for 15 fucking minutes straight until the boss's health is down? Nope. Like I said, guys, the jokes write themselves in this article. In fact, I think I might have written it myself. I believe that someday in the future I will discover time travel, and instead of like going to see the dinosaurs or like killing Adolf or preventing any kind of massive disaster like the Game of Thrones finale, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right to this time and do this stupid interview with Corinne Busch just for the lols. To Busch, games like The Sims or even Animal Crossing continue to flourish because of being deeply relatable games that reflect our real lives. But in a way, that same idea can apply to a complex RPG like Dragon Age, and Busch's time with The Sims gave her a unique advantage going into Veilguard. No, it didn't. Busch couldn't even nail the complex RPG parts of Dragon Age. This new BioWare team stripped all of them down, all complexity was thrown out the window. It's not even an RPG anymore, and even in the story and world building, that complexity is gone too, as I just showed at the start of this video with Patrick Weeks admitting that they don't want to complicate things. They wanted to keep the story as clear as possible. That shit literally translates to getting rid of complexity. And the funny thing is that, and again, I don't want to be mean, I'm in a great mood here. It's almost Christmas, I can't wait to have the family over. I'm gonna make them some bomb-ass pate and garlic bread. I got my shopping list ready. I'm gonna eat my fill. I'm gonna take a giant when everyone's gone to bed, and then I'm gonna game until like 5 in the morning. Then the next day it's lunchtime over at my aunt's place. Like, I'm doing good, fellas. I'm doing good. But you know, at the end of the day, roses are red, the beacons are lit, Gondor calls for aid, and whoever wrote this article is full of shit. Because if you look at the elements of Sims and you try to apply them to Veilguard, you will find nothing there. And you got some examples that you can take from other games. For example, Fallout 4. One feature that game had was the whole settlement building management system. Some people liked it, some people hated it. I personally loved it. I didn't want it as a replacement for good writing, of course, but I did like the addition of it. I like additional immersion elements in my games. Maybe immersion isn't the best word here, actually. Basically, I like elements that tie me into the world a bit more, especially in RPGs or adventure games. So for example, in Skyrim, I love the fact that we can buy houses or even build our own and get a little family. We don't have to sleep, we don't have to eat, at least not outside of survival mode, of course, but I loved returning to these places anyway. It ties me to the world, it's very organic, it makes me feel like I'm truly living this character's story and adventure. So in Fallout 4, I loved building up Sanctuary into this massive hub. Big, strong, protection all over, a big market in the center, fancy living spaces, etc. The works. And I enjoy doing other things in other spots of the world, like for example, I love a big military-ish base out of the drive-in location. I love to make a secret base in the Kingsport Lighthouse. I think I got the name right. Oh, and I love Egret Tours Marina. Super cool place to make a little secret base as well. So on and so forth. I'll stop myself here before I nerd out a bit too much over Fallout 4 and trigger an alarm in Enclave Emily's headquarters. The point is that these are what we could call Sims-ish elements in Fallout 4, proving that yeah, you can do that if you want to in an RPG. But as we can see in Veilguard, there's nothing. There is nothing that allows you to be a social creature and form connections. There's no immersive aspect tying you in or offering you simulation, nor deeply relating you to its game world or reflecting your real life, unless you're a fucking retard. Oh god, I'm fuck it, I'm not cutting it out. I'm gonna leave it in. Merry Christmas, fellas. Notice the manipulation of the language and the outright lies in this next part. As such, Dragon Age has always been incredibly progressive. Origins liberally featured queer romances, and Inquisition, the third game in the series, has a whole plotline about a major side character being transgender. This allows the series to explore themes of identity and belonging in ways that other RPGs can't, and Veilguard certainly sticks to that idea. Dragon Age has always been incredibly progressive, and then the example given is queer romance, which, let's just call it what it is instead of using more and more unnecessary rainbow fairy terms, it means gay and bi relationships. That's it. People like using the word queer to include all the infinite number of genders encompassed by the non-binary label, because of course if you look at a non-binary person, let's say Tash, and she's making out with Harding, which is what unfortunately happened during my playthrough, then calling them a lesbian relationship would be misgendering the non-binary person. Same if it's with a dude and you call it a hetero relationship. So they just make up new terms like queer relationships, which is simply a lie. There were no non-binary people in Origins, and the included progressive thing there was gay and bisexual characters who you could romance as the player. That's it. That's not incredibly progressive, that's hardly even counts as progressive these days, and various games have done it as well. I'm not trying to take this away from Dragon Age and Mass Effect. It is true that they've always done this, and it's a good thing that they did, because it shows that once upon a time you could make a fantastic RPG where the story is about the Blight and the Darkspawn, or about the Reapers and an extinction event, with great characters, with realistic sexual orientations, without turning the games into a pile of ideologically propagandized garbage. Like Veilguard, for example. A lot of people in the industry like to hide themselves behind these terms and use them as both a sword and a shield to get what they want. They like to pretend as if everyone is a racist, everyone is a transphobe or a homophobe or whatever else just because nobody wants any of this stuff in the games. Ooh. And at the same time, they like the privilege of being able to grab something like Dragon Age and say, this was always progressive, look at this. Well, they have to pick one or the other. They can't do both because both cannot coexist. Either we're all racists and sexists and misogynists and phobes and this and that, and we don't want any of this stuff in our games, or we're the people who never had any problem with it in the first place back in the original games. You can't have both. You can only have one, so you gotta pick. Either you're bullshitting yourself and everyone around you, or these games are because these developers suck at writing characters and don't have a clue of how to implement these things into the games like developers used to do 10-15 years ago, before being ideologically obsessed with this shit. Then the Shill says that Inquisition, and again notice the way that they wrote it, has a whole plotline about a major side character being transgender. When you hear that, who does your mind immediately go to? Mine immediately goes to Tash and the abysmal work that was done with that character. And right now, if I was some random guy who never played Inquisition, I would be thinking that they put a character just like Tash into that game as well, because that's precisely what is described here. A whole plotline about a major side character being trans, except in Tasha's case, it's non-binary. These are both lies. There is no such thing as a whole plotline about that in Inquisition. They're referring to Krem. Krem isn't even a major character, he's a minor side character. Major ones are your companions and all the people central to the plot or to the world. Krem was just a dude in Iron Bull's mercenary crew whom you can have a few conversations with in regards to his gender if you go out looking for him and check his dialogues. Some of which were actually interesting and much more respectable than Veilguard. For example, you can ask, why not change all the way, alluding to Tevinter blood magic actually making the process possible. This is a question that Veilguard would never even consider to pose because they would find it offensive, since these people are obsessed with the tokenism of transsexuality rather than the realism of transsexuality. That's why there's top surgery scars in a world where there is no such thing as top surgery to transition. The realism of transsexuality is that if you asked a trans person if they would magically change all the way if they could, then they would very likely say yes, because the goal is just a path so they can live as normal life as possible under their circumstances. Normal trans people, unlike Corinne Bush, do not seek to label themselves as such for all to see and know. The only reason Cram says no to that question being that Tevinter blood magic is terrifying. Anyway, just an interesting tidbit of information for you. The rest of this crap is just depressing, but also very telling as to what happened with Dragon Age Veilguard as a game. I'm an openly queer trans woman. It shaped everything about who I am, and it's been the source of a lot of joy, a lot of difficulty and perspective. For me personally, one of the greatest gifts about being trans is the amount of introspection it forces upon you. You spend a lot of time deeply examining who you are and why that matters. Man, that sounds like some boring shit, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's really sad how a person's gender identity is everything that they are. It makes for a sad and even sickly existence. Most people, even normal trans people included, you know, they're just themselves. You got your own interests, your own hobbies, your families, your friends, your jobs, your colleagues, your aspirations, your goals, the stuff you like, the stuff you dislike, the experiences and the things that define certain aspects of yourselves, of your personality, etc. Having your gender be the entire center of your identity is a sign of a serious underlying mental condition, and I'm not even talking about dysphoria here. This is much worse and reeks of narcissistic inclinations. I believe that this is why so many games are being plagued by this shit these days and turning out horrible. Deeply narcissistic tendencies from directors, lead developers, moronic studio heads, etc. wanting to take these big franchises, big brands, and morphing them to carry their own personal identities and personal baggage, much like what was done with Veilguard. As a game director inheriting such a massive franchise, she should have given it the respect that it deserved by placing herself beneath the franchise. Her job should have been to serve and add to the legacy of Dragon Age, rather than to disregard and destroy it just for self-servicing ideological purposes. Now over here we have a lot of really empty and stupid word salad nonsense, to be honest. For Bush, great games offer a mirror that allows you to reflect on your own identity, preferences, and choices. When developing a game, Bush says she is thinking about the role introspection plays on people in general, and how each of us go through our lives having these moments of crisis, epiphanies, and those quiet moments when you're alone, in the shitter. These are questions that are ripe for personalized experiences like RPGs, especially when you consider our biggest creative pillar: be who you want to be. This introspection into BioWare also allows us to see precisely what it is that they wanted to be. Unemployed. I think that since this was the first game that Corinne developed, and you know, the result of the game being what it was, this should be a lesson that all developers of major AAA RPGs should take as what not to do, because they're supposed to be selling their games to gamers, not to games journalists. I would also argue that these very moments of crisis, epiphanies, and other things that we go through in our lives are the #1 reason why when we get home and we pop into a big fantasy RPG, we want to be whisked away into a world of unfettered fantasy. We want to escape our daily bullshit and be distracted by things that are far more fantastical and interesting and beautiful than ourselves, our world, and our problems. There absolutely are places for such games in this industry. Sometimes I play them myself, and they work. When done well, these games can fully stop us in our tracks and even bring tears to our eyes. But a big AAA production of a fantasy RPG as a sequel to an already established franchise is not the place for that. And more importantly, if you truly want to do that, then you need to be really good at it. And you need to truly have a message that people can relate with, or that they can at least empathize with. And you need to be damn incredible at writing it and presenting it, otherwise it's just not going to work. It's going to be an embarrassment, just as it was each and every single time that Tosh popped up on screen acting like a fucking child. This is not something that's going to be comfortable to hear, but it must be said. These gender identity issues, this whole modern nonsense, is really not that interesting to anyone but yourselves, and by yourselves I mean the director and whoever resonates with their message. To the majority of the world, nobody cares. You've been tricked into believing that we do because the media, entertainment, government, corporations, education, etc. have pushed it forward and invaded spaces with it. In reality, if you took away all of this shit tomorrow, nobody would talk about it ever again, because not only is it such a tiny minority of a thing that most of us would never even encounter it in our daily lives, but also it just doesn't matter. Sexuality, gender, race, what the does any of this matter? Give me something to hook onto. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about what you like to do. Tell me about your tastes in media. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about where you grew up. Tell me about your grandparents. Tell me about what they used to do. Tell me something interesting. Tell me something of substance. But this nonsense, especially cobbled together with victim mentality, this is nothing. It only matters because of the bad effects that it's causing, such as the invasion of female spaces and female sports, unchecked immigration, ideological takeover of media and entertainment, and the aggressive push towards indoctrinating children in schools and starting transitioning them without their informed consent, etc. You take away all of this stuff, and all of this gender theory and identity politics nonsense is a drop in the ocean. So good luck trying to emotionally reach the majority of the gaming audience with this kind of nonsense, even in the right genre. Good luck trying to make people cry with these kinds of themes versus, for example, the death of Lee Everett at the hands of Clementine in the beautiful finale of Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1. Now is when things take a turn and go down the big bullshit expressway, so I'll be trying to keep it chill, but we do have to get real here and cut through the delusions and emotional manipulations that are designed to get them everything that they want handed to them on a silver platter with a thank you note and a condolence card. Questions about BioWare's future abound, especially with the team now pivoting to focus work on Mass Effect 5, but in the immediate future the studio has faced a different problem, a hate campaign that's put Veilguard at the center of a kind of culture war, with plenty of hateful comments towards developers and review bombing on sites like Metacritic. Here we go again. This nonsense of playing the victim and acting like their flops are hate campaigns are some of the main things that these big corporate bosses should immediately identify as a ticket to get fired, because it shows that these people haven't learned a goddamn thing from their failures. And in game development, as with many other things in life, you must learn from your failures to be able to do better next time. If you just take a failure and blame it on everyone else around you, playing the victim because that's all you've ever been able to do, you'll never learn anything and improve. The only thing you'll achieve is to make yourself, your studio, studio and your entire brand gain lolcow status. This paragraph also tries to downplay the culture war going on and the placement of Veilguard in it, when in reality Veilguard was made by this culture war for this culture war, and the very same agenda that drove these developers in the creation of such a heavily ideologically driven game is also the same agenda that got the game love-bombed by quote-unquote official reviews and outlets. These reviews ended up being hilarious because they praised it with so much glowing praise that they managed to break the suspension of disbelief. This is the type of game where if you want to try to cover up how bad the game is, you give it like a 7, you don't give it a 9 and a 10. And also, the developers were not attacked out of thin air, they came out and insulted their own fanbase publicly on social media. The did they expect would happen in return? Bush says, "It's hard. I grew up in a time where it really felt like we were there to celebrate the games and to have these shared experiences. I think the discourse we see is the result of highly polarized times. It's hard when you have to ask the question, is this game for me? Do I belong here? And games are better for it when we can say, yes, you do belong here." Here we go again with this manipulative bullshit, this cult language of tolerance, acceptance, inclusion, and all these other buzzwords that mean nothing. Like, what do you mean, do I belong here? There is no here, it's a video game. You look at it, if you like what you see, you buy it and you play it, and if you don't, and you move on. That's it, it's so simple, it's actually insane to even have to say this. I hate this framing because this exists solely in the mind of a sick person. Only through the mind of a deeply narcissistic, gender and race-obsessed freak can the question of, do I belong here, come up when looking at a Blu-ray set for the Lord of the Rings extended edition or some shit. These products are made for entertainment. They owe nothing to anyone. The only thing that they owe is they owe it to themselves to be the best quality that they can be, so that they can sell and make a profit and leave a legacy that is bigger than any single person that worked on them, with hopes that in the future this legacy will continue to inspire new people and bring them all together from all corners of the world, from all backgrounds, from all cultures, through their shared love of this one remarkable thing. That's it. It's as simple as that. That's how it works. That's how normal people view the media. That is what the 99% feel like. They want to buy something because it's supposed to be good. Whatever it means to them after that, through their own interpretations of the media inside, is a wholly separate business. But what they definitely don't do is look to be personally validated and represented in whatever piece of fiction they're looking to buy. This is a sign that you need to go to see a therapist as fast as possible. This necessity to parse everything through this DEI filter, this filter of gender, race and sexuality obsession, is the goddamn original sin of this entire culture war. Dragon Age is far from the only game that's come under fire recently, particularly for inclusions of diversity or diverse storytelling. For most of this year, Assassin's Creed Shadows has been the constant target of a hate campaign. The creator of the indie game Tales of Kinzera, Zhao Abubakar Salim, has also been vocal about the fever pitch of racism the game and its team have received. The irony is rich with this one. Assassin's Creed Shadows team wiped their asses with Japanese history, culture and architecture by misrepresenting a bunch of it in the game, and remember that all that we saw was a couple of trailers and gameplay clips. God only knows how much more of this shit we would find in the full release. Furthermore, unlike other Assassin's Creed games that featured characters native to their setting, in Shadows Ubisoft decided to make Yasuke the star of the show, but worse than that, they decided to make him samurai and market it as a historically accurate character, which he was not. There are plenty of videos online from historians breaking down every document with mentions of Yasuke and the Honnoji incident. Also, the writer of the Yasuke Samurai book went into hiding after being called out, and admitting that he embellished and made up a lot of details. And even from the angle of representation of black people, this was laughable, as Ubisoft goes ahead and plays hip-hop music anytime Yasuke breaks into combat. Hip-hop in feudal Japan.
What do you mean by that?
Because of course, we know the brothers love some of that hip-hop, and that's just some of what happened. Ubisoft deserves every bit of backlash and criticism lunged at them. While I don't approve or condone of any extreme behavior such as personal attacks, death threats, etc., the vast majority of what actually happens in these instances is people calling them out as a company and then making fun of what they're doing. Much like what this article is going to cause for Corinne and BioWare and the game. Like, you can't just feed people with bullshit not expect to get called out. Then this dude brings up Tales of Kenzura Zao, which of course was attacked by racists. Yeah, sure. Totally has nothing to do with the fact that this studio aligned itself with Sweet Baby Inc., thereby using the services of actual racists. Here's some lovely comments from the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc. on screen right now. Comments, by the way, that the writer of this article is notoriously known for as well. This idiot knew what he was doing. He already knew that consultant company like the palm of his hand. He knew their disdain for the gaming space. Hell, he was part of it. You can try and play the victim all you like in situations like these. These fake-ass journalists will eat it up, but people will always be here to set the record straight, whether they like it or not. I know, and something that's very important to me is that games are inherently diverse when you think about the size of these teams and the specializations you have within them. I think we need to consider that we can make the most authentic, best experiences when we're tying into what makes us as the developers and you as the fans. When we can tie into those elements that make us distinctly human, and that means differences. Wow, what a bunch of garbage. The beauty of team diversity when creating anything at all has got nothing to do with their identities. Again, here we go with this obsession with it doesn't matter. The beauty of team diversity comes from having all these different people who grew up in different circumstances, who have different experiences, different inspirations, different favorite pieces of media, and different things that they dislike, etc., coming together to passionately create something new that they are pumped about. So that when you're making something, you're not locked down by your own limitations. You got all these other people coming together and adding more fresh ideas as well as fleshing out existing ones, letting their brains run wild with imagination and seeing what will end up fitting into the final product and what won't. And none of it has anything to do with diversity. You could have 30 white dudes in a room, all of them straight, and have all 30 of them have vastly different ideas, vastly different experiences to contribute into what you're making. If not, then there wouldn't be any classic fantastic franchises that were created way back in the day when teams of developers were literally just a bunch of dudes. What's the point of bringing people together and then hyperfixating on the most basic and superficial and uninteresting parts of them, such as their gender, their race, their sexuality, and all of this other crap that players simply do not want shoved into their fantasy, such as wasting an entire character and questline wallowing around with non-binary nonsense. In Busch's mind, not embracing the lived experiences of the development team would result in stories and worlds that feel less relatable, less alive. No, it doesn't. Busch is just a fucking talentless narcissist, and that's why they can't make a compelling story with a compelling character. That's why they can't make anything at all that doesn't personally pertain to them. Pick any fucking great game from a hat and you will find all manner of characters and stories that don't relate to anyone in the development team. Hell, that don't even relate to anyone at all in this world, because sometimes the best damn stories that you can tell, especially in big fictional genres like fantasy and sci-fi, are stories that are entirely detached from what our lives look like. Game developers also need to feel safe in what they do, which ultimately means being able to see themselves reflected in their work. Oh my god, this is so fucking embarrassing, dude. Oh my god, what the f are you talking about? Holy shit, this is the most embarrassing thing I ever read. How did this pass? How did this get approved? Why would Corinne allow this garbage to be posted? It's just making everyone in this new BioWare team look like a pussy. I mean, what the hell are you on about? Feeling safe? What are you, fucking working at an oil rig or something? What are you, fucking fishing in the Arctic? What are you, fucking cleaning the windows on the Burj Khalifa? Huh? Well, what are you doing? Serving your country in a war zone or something? What's going on over at BioWare? You don't got security at the door? What's going on? Is the floor slippery or something? What is this? Where's the studio located at? Fucking Mordor? You're that fragile of a person that you need to be working on something that reflects you in order to feel safe? This is fucking embarrassing, dude. They need to get all these morons out of that studio if they want the next Mass Effect to have a chance in hell at succeeding. We have an incredibly diverse player base, and what I mean by that is their motivations and expectations. This becomes the biggest opportunity to continue that tradition of reinvention. Yeah, reinvent yourselves into a f***ing studio shutdown. At the end of the day, Busch believes gamers have so much in common, starting with a love for the game. Yeah, we do. We think your game was What I long for is just that opportunity for us as gamers to step back and get in touch with why we fell in love with games in the first place, and recognize how difficult and complicated and messy it is to make games. To share these vulnerable experiences and just approach it with a little greater sense of kindness and curiosity. We know how difficult, complicated and messy it is to make games, which is precisely why we are so strongly against this ideological garbage, because this ideological garbage does not produce good games. At the end of the day, what's truly going on here is that people like Busch have been handed everything. They didn't earn their way to where they are ahead of these major franchises, and of course I'm just not talking about Busch and Dragon Age, I'm obviously talking about all of these other morons ahead of all of these other places like Assassin's Creed Shadows, the morons ahead of Soy Squad, the morons ahead of the games that let Sweet Baby Inc. come in and screw up their quality, giants like Sony and Microsoft included with their own games compromised by sick ideologically delusional people either ahead of or working on games such as Avowed, Perfect Dark, the Marvel franchises at Insomniac, Naughty Dog, and God forbid, the future Ghost of Yotai and God of War games. We see clear as day what's going on. Millions and millions being wasted so that talentless people that did not earn their way to the top like Corinne Busch can live out their fantasies. These people are making these studios ideologically compromised. The work they make is poisoned. There are billions of dollars at stake as we speak, invested into these massive titles being developed right now, and they're being held down by garbage that harms the creative freedom. They're being worked on by people that proudly admit that they hate gamers and are doing everything in their power to piss them off with the content that they're putting in the game. They proudly announce that they are not making their games for us, they're making them for themselves and for an elusive modern audience that has already shown itself to be far too small to make AAA games successful and viable. They have quite literally lost their claim. They had several opportunities already to come out and show interest for this filth that is being made, thereby establishing a new standard for the AAA industry to follow. However, they failed every single time, even outside of the AAA space, with games like Dustborn, Unknown 9 Awakening, Tales of Kenzarozao, and Flintlock not reporting success, despite being made with far less money and needing far less sales in order to be profitable. And yet, despite this obvious signaling that this shit doesn't work, that these studios are going through hard times, firing developers, downsizing, and at times even getting shut down because of the very simple fact that what they are making is not appealing to people, they still keep getting made. No admissions of mistakes are done, no signs of scaling down this ideologically driven garbage are shown, no nothing. Instead, we see these companies doubling down, and we know why. If it wasn't obvious enough that this is an agenda simply by the fact that these big greedy fucking corporations are losing money and still doing the same shit over and over and over again, we have an admission in color and with clear audio of BlackRock CEO admitting their goal of forcing behaviors on these companies, benefiting those who pump their ideological garbage into their workforce and products, and impacting those who refuse to do so. So when they ask us to step back and get in touch with why we fell in love with games and be kinder and more curious, what they're really asking is that we close our eyes to all of this stuff that's going on and just be kind and positive and cute and inclusive, and that's just not going to happen. We've made it more than clear that we're not going to be shamed, guilted, or anything else into buying their ideologically compromised trash. Their response so far has been to either dismiss what the majority wants or to straight up insult us. So, fair enough, it is what it is. Let's see if their behavior-forcing investment companies are able to keep their lights on, while people like Corinne Busch are handed positions that they didn't earn and that they don't hold any respect for, leading them into wasting hundreds of millions of dollars, making garbage that nobody wants to engage with, because to them the priority is the message and the agenda rather than the actual quality of the games. This is what needs to drastically change in the AAA space right now. Big publishers are being given lifelines by companies like BlackRock, making the impact from their flops be significantly reduced. This is why I say that while voting with our wallets is important, it is also compromised at the moment because it's being deflected by these companies investing money into social engineering. However, this is not going to last forever. No one's pockets can be that deep that they can tank hundreds and millions of dollars over and over and over. Either these game publishers will need to wake the up and get back to making good games, or they're going to crash and burn, opening the space for new studios to naturally grow and take over by giving us exactly what the market is demanding. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, dropping me a like and subscribing would be a great help. If you've got any thoughts or feedback for me, leave it in the comments. Have yourselves a great day, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you on the next one.